They came marching through the knee-high ryegrass in khakis and pastel polos, wielding clipboards like holy relics. 4 of them, stepping right past the rusting "No Trespassing" sign my grandfather nailed to the oak tree in 1968. That was their first mistake. I didn't wait around for their second. My grandfather bought this dirt in '68. 40 acres of hardpan and mesquite in the Texas Hill Country, back when the nearest grocery store was a 40-minute drive down a 2-lane blacktop. By the time my dad took over, it was a working cattle operation, loud and smelling of diesel, sweat, and manure. By the time it got to me, it was a sanctuary. Just me, 3 retired quarter horses, and a stubborn blue heeler named Buster. I buried my wife, Diane, on the ridge overlooking the creek. She loved the silence out here, the way the cicadas hummed in the evening, the way the dusk caught the light right before the sun dipped below the horizon. This land wasn't a real estate portfolio. It wasn't a line item on a tax return. It was my blood. It was the only thing I had left of her. Then came the developers. They didn't arrive all at once. It was a slow, creeping rot. First, they bought out the Henderson spread to the east. Old man Henderson passed, and his kids couldn't sell the acreage fast enough. Then, the Miller place to the south went under the bulldozer. Before I knew it, my 40 acres were an island. A rough, weathered rock sitting in a sea of beige stucco manicured Bermuda grass and chemically treated community water features. They called the new subdivision Whispering Pines. There wasn't a single pine tree within a 50-mile radius, and they'd clear-cut all the native oaks to build their identical 3-car garage monstrosities. They built their privacy fences right up to my property line. I didn't care. I minded my business. I fixed my fences. I fed my horses. I sat on my porch and drank my black coffee, watching the headlights of their imported SUVs snake through the cul-de-sacs. I figured they'd leave me alone. I was wrong. The trouble started with a letter. It showed up in my mailbox on a Tuesday, printed on heavy cream-colored stock with a raised gold seal at the top. Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. I opened it at the kitchen table. The text was thick with bureaucratic jargon, but the message was clear. I was being issued a friendly warning for keeping unauthorized livestock on my premises and for the unsightly condition of a 1956 Ford tractor parked near the western fence line. The letter politely requested that I remove the animals and the machinery within 14 days to avoid fines. I read it twice. I laughed until my chest hurt. I didn't live in Whispering Pines. I hadn't signed their covenants. My property predated their plastic neighborhood by half a century. I crumpled the heavy cream paper, tossed it into the wood stove, and went back to my coffee. 2 weeks later, Greg introduced himself. I was out mending a section of barbed wire near the western boundary when a golf cart whirred up to the opposite side of the 6-foot vinyl privacy fence. A man stepped out. He wore a salmon-colored polo shirt tucked into flat-front khaki shorts. His sunglasses probably cost more than my first truck. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was loud, practiced, the voice of a man used to running morning meetings. "Are you the owner of this plot?" I didn't stop working the wire stretchers. "I am. I'm Greg, president of the Whispering Pines HOA. He leaned over his side of the vinyl fence, wrinkling his nose as the wind shifted, carrying the scent of horse manure. "Did you receive our correspondence?" "I got a piece of trash in my mailbox, if that's what you mean." Greg's smile tightened. It didn't reach his eyes. "We sent you a notice regarding the code violations. The livestock, the rusting machinery, it's bringing down the property values for the homes on this side of the development. We're trying to maintain a certain standard here." I clamped the wire and turned to look at him. "Greg, do you see this barbed wire?" "Yes, and frankly, it's an eyesore." "It's a property line." I cut him off. "My property line? I don't live in Whispering Pines. Wait, I'm not in your HOA. You have exactly zero authority over what I do on this side of the fence. Have a good afternoon." I went back to my tools. Greg stood there for a long moment, breathing heavily through his nose. "We'll see about that," he muttered, turning back to his golf cart. "You can't just operate a junkyard next to a premium residential zone." I didn't watch him drive away. I just pulled the wire tight, tied it off, and patted Buster on the head. I thought I had put a pompous idiot in his place. I didn't realize I had just declared war on a man who had absolutely nothing better to do with his life than make mine hell. The letters started coming twice a week. They escalated from friendly warnings to official citations. The fines printed at the bottom of the pages grew from $50 to $500. They cited me for the height of my pasture grass. They cited me for the color of my barn roof. They cited me for the noise my dog made when he barked at the coyotes at 2 in the morning. It was a phantom debt, completely legally unenforceable, but the sheer volume of it was exhausting. It felt like being slowly pecked to death by ducks. I took a stack of the letters down to a buddy of mine, a real estate lawyer in town named Jim. Jim flipped through them in his office, shaking his head. "This is toilet paper, Bill. They have no jurisdiction over your land. You're grandfathered in, and you're unincorporated." "So, how do I make them stop?" I asked, feeling the tight, familiar ache in my jaw from grinding my teeth all night. Jim sighed, tossing the letters onto his desk. "You can't. Not easily. These HOA boards, they attract a specific type of personality. People who are powerless in the real world, so they build a tiny kingdom where they can play God. They'll keep sending these until they get bored. Just ignore them. If they try to put a lien on your property, call me, and we'll sue them into the Stone Age." I drove home feeling a hollow sort of comfort. I was legally in the right. But as I pulled through my rusted front gate and saw a sleek silver sedan parked on the shoulder of the road, pointing a camera at my barn, I realized being legally right didn't matter. They weren't going to stop. The drone arrived in late August. The Texas heat was baking the moisture out of the ground, turning the soil into cracked concrete. I was on the porch, wiping grease off my hands with an old rag, when I heard the high-pitched mechanical whine. I looked up. Hovering about 30 feet above my corral was a white quadcopter. The camera lens underneath it pivoted, focusing directly on the water troughs and the horses standing lazily in the shade of the lean-to. Buster went crazy. He bolted off the porch, barking furiously, jumping at the air beneath the machine. I walked out into the yard, squinting against the glare of the sun. The drone drifted lower, buzzing like an oversized metallic hornet. They were looking for violations. They were taking inventory of my life. It was a profound, deeply unsettling invasion of privacy. I felt a hot spike of anger start at the base of my neck and shoot straight into my skull. I walked over to the spigot by the barn, picked up the heavy-duty rubber hose, and turned the pressure valve all the way up. I grabbed the brass nozzle. I didn't yell. I didn't make a show of it. I just tracked the drone as it dipped down to 20 feet, adjusting its angle to get a better look at my open barn doors. I squeezed the trigger. A solid, high-pressure stream of well water shot into the air, catching the drone squarely on its right rotors. The machine violently tilted, its motors screaming as they tried to compensate. It wasn't enough. The water shorted something out, and the drone dropped out of the sky like a stone, smashing into the dust of the corral. Buster immediately ran over and clamped his jaws around one of the plastic arms, shaking it fiercely. "Leave it, Buster," I called out. He dropped the plastic carcass, looking at me proudly. 10 minutes later, the silver sedan I'd seen before came roaring down the dirt road outside my gate. It stopped abruptly, kicking up a cloud of dust. A younger man, early 30s, slicked back hair, wearing a vest despite the heat, jumped out. Let's call him Kevin. He jogged up to my closed iron gate, looking frantic. Hey, you!" Kevin shouted, gripping the bars of the gate. "That was my drone. You destroyed private property." I walked down the driveway slowly, stopping about 10 feet from the gate. I kicked the broken pieces of the drone forward with the toe of my boot. It skidded under the gap of the gate and stopped at his feet. "You dropped some trash on my land," I said, my voice dead calm. "Come back and retrieve it again, and I won't use a hose." Kevin's face went red. "You're crazy. We have a right to inspect properties adjacent to the neighborhood for code compliance. Greg warned us about you. You're a menace. Get off my fence line, son. We're filing a police report, Kevin yelled, snatching up the broken pieces. We're going to bill you for this. It was $1,000 rig. Send the bill to my horse, I said, turning my back on him and walking to the house. He's the one who cares. The police never came. Instead, the harassment became structural. They started calling the county health department, making anonymous complaints about illegal dumping on my property. County inspectors showed up, apologetic but obligated to check. They found nothing but a man living quietly. Then the HOA called animal control, claiming my horses were malnourished. Another inspector came out, petted my fat, healthy quarter horses, rolled his eyes, and left. They were trying to exhaust me. They wanted to make living on my own land so painful, so filled with friction, that I would just give up and sell the acreage to the developers waiting in the wings. I knew exactly what they were doing. Diane used to say that anger was a poison you drank yourself, hoping the other person would die. I tried to remember that. I tried to keep my head down. But the constant surveillance, the whispering campaigns in town, the petty bureaucratic warfare, it was eroding my soul. I stopped sleeping through the night. Every time a car drove past the gate, my chest tightened. My sanctuary had become a fishbowl. The boiling point hit in mid-October. I had ordered a delivery of seasoned oak firewood for the coming winter. The truck had dumped the massive cord near the western property line, about 20 feet from the vinyl fence, separating my land from whispering pines. I planned to move it up to the house with the tractor over the weekend. On Thursday morning, I walked out with my coffee to find an orange sticker slapped onto my side of the wooden fence post near the woodpile. Official notice of abatement. Whispering Pines HOA. Violation: unsecured combustible materials posing an immediate fire hazard to adjacent residences. Action required. Remove within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in the association hiring private contractors to remove the hazard at the property owner's expense. They had trespassed onto my land in the middle of the night to stick a notice on my post. I touched the cheap adhesive paper. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a deep, primal rage that had been simmering for 6 months. They actually believed their own delusion. They believed the rules they made up in their sterile living rooms superseded the law, superseded reality, superseded a man's right to exist on his own dirt. I didn't call Jim the lawyer. I didn't go into town. I walked back into the house, unlocked the heavy steel safe in my bedroom closet, and pulled out my Remington 870 pump-action shotgun. I checked the chamber, loaded 3 shells of birdshot into the tube, and set it down heavily on the kitchen table. I wasn't going to hunt anyone. I wasn't a killer. But a man's property line is his last defense against a world that wants to swallow him whole. If the law wouldn't stop them, and common sense wouldn't stop them, I needed to speak the only language bullies actually understand. Consequence. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the armchair by the front window, the Remington resting across my lap, watching the moon cast long shadows across the pasture. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear. The dew was heavy on the ryegrass. At exactly 8:30, I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel shoulder outside my front gate. Then, the slam of car doors. Multiple doors. Buster growled from his bed near the stove. I stood up, pushing the armchair back. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside just an inch. There was a white landscaping truck parked outside my gate, idling. Behind it was Greg's silver SUV. Greg stepped out, looking crisp in a pastel yellow polo and khakis, holding a clipboard. Kevin was with him, along with 2 burly guys in high-vis vests, the hired contractors. Greg was pointing at my gate, then gesturing toward the woodpile in the distance. He was giving orders. He walked up to my heavy iron gate, secured by a thick chain and a padlock. He looked at the padlock, then turned to one of the contractors and nodded. The contractor pulled a pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters from the back of the truck. They were actually doing it. They were breaking in. I felt my heart rate slow down. The noise of the past 6 months, the letters, the drones, the inspectors, the stress, suddenly went completely silent. The world narrowed down to a sharp, crystal-clear focus. I picked up the Remington from the table. The worn wood of the stock felt warm and familiar against my palm. I racked the slide. The loud, metallic clack, clack echoed in the quiet kitchen. I walked to the front door, turned the deadbolt, and stepped out onto the porch. I stepped off the porch. The morning air was crisp, but a dry heat already lingered beneath the surface. Gravel crunched under my work boots. Every step felt immensely heavy and incredibly deliberate. I did not run. I did not shout. I held the Remington across my chest, keeping the barrel pointed safely toward the cloudless sky. The message was obvious. The contractor with the heavy bolt cutters had just clamped the steel jaws onto my rusted padlock. He froze. The metallic click of my shotgun slide echoing through the silent valley had reached him. He slowly turned his head. His eyes dropped to the firearm. He let go of the tool handles immediately. The heavy iron cutters swung straight down, hitting the gate with a dull thud. Greg and Kevin had their backs turned, arguing quietly about where they wanted the landscaping truck positioned. They did not notice the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The contractor took 2 slow steps backward, raising both of his hands into the air. Though he did not say a single word. He just stared at the scarred wooden stock of my weapon. His terrified partner in the bright orange vest noticed him backing away. The second contractor looked up. Dave followed that deeply terrified gaze and immediately stopped walking. He dropped his clipboard into the dirt. The sudden noise finally made Greg turn around. Greg was holding his expensive smartphone, thumb hovering over the screen, likely drafting another ridiculous citation. He looked through the iron bars of my front gate. His brain took a few seconds to process the visual information. He saw the quiet old man he had been relentlessly harassing for 6 months. He saw the black steel of the loaded pump-action shotgun resting comfortably in my calloused right hand right now. The blood drained from his face. He looked like a man who had confidently stepped onto what he thought was a painted floor, only to realize he was falling into an empty elevator shaft. All of that bureaucratic armor evaporated. The smug confidence completely vanished. He was no longer a powerful president of a neighborhood committee. He was just a soft man in a pastel shirt trespassing on another private property. Kevin stepped up beside him, opening his mouth to yell something arrogant. Then Kevin saw the gun. His jaw snapped shut with an audible click right then and there. "Morning," I said. My voice was level, carrying easily across the short distance. I did not raise it above a conversational volume. "You boys seem perfectly lost." Greg swallowed hard. His throat bobbed nervously in sheer panic. He looked at the heavy bolt cutters dangling from my iron gate, then back at me. He tried to speak, but only a dry, raspy sound emerged. He cleared his throat forcefully. "We are executing an abatement order," he finally stammered. His voice trembled slightly. "You are in violation. We have hired these men to remove the hazardous woodpile right away from here." "That is interesting," I replied, shifting my weight slightly, "because my property line extends exactly 2 inches past this iron gate, which means those bolt cutters are currently attached to my private property, and the 4 of you are standing on my gravel shoulder, actively attempting forced entry. I am simply curious if you understand the legal implications of what you are doing right now in the state of Texas." The first contractor did not care about the legal implications. "Hey man, we just cut grass and hauled junk," he blurted out quickly. "We are leaving right now, this second." The contractor did not wait for Greg to dismiss him. He turned and practically sprinted toward the white landscaping truck. His partner was right behind him. They scrambled into the cab, slamming the heavy doors shut in unison. The engine roared to life with a desperate whine. Greg watched them abandon him, his eyes widening in pure panic. The illusion of his authority was shattering into a million tiny pieces. Kevin was already backing away toward the silver vehicle, leaving Greg standing entirely alone near my gate. "You cannot threaten us like this," Greg said, his voice cracking very badly. "I have not threatened a single soul," I told him, stepping closer to the fence. I am standing on my own dirt, holding my own property, protecting my own home. You are the one who brought a demolition crew to a private front door. Now I am going to ask you very politely to remove your trash from my gate. I pointed a calloused finger toward the hanging bolt cutters. Greg stared at them. He clearly did not want to step any closer to the fence line. He looked incredibly small. I am calling the police right now, Greg whispered. Please do. I smiled. It was a cold, tired smile. Tell them you are attempting to break into a gated ranch with heavy tools. I am sure the county sheriff would love to hear that specific story. Greg hesitated for one agonizing second. Then, pure survival instinct finally overrode his incredibly fragile ego. He spun around and walked quickly toward his expensive vehicle. He did not look back. He practically dove into the driver's seat. The tires of his vehicle spun violently in the loose gravel, kicking up a massive cloud of pale dust as he sped away down south. The white landscaping truck had already vanished over the hill. The road was suddenly empty again. Silence returned to the valley, heavy and complete. I stood there for a long time, watching the dust settle slowly onto the dry ryegrass. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving a hollow ache in my chest. I lowered the barrel of the shotgun. Buster trotted down the driveway, sniffed the abandoned bolt cutters hanging from the gate, and then looked up at me. I walked over, removed the heavy tool from my rusted padlock, and tossed it into the tall pasture weeds. Very quietly, I walked back to the house, feeling every single year of my age in my knees. I placed the unloaded weapon back inside the heavy steel safe. Then I sat at the kitchen table and finally dialed Jim. I told him exactly what had happened. I did not leave out any details. Jim was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was laced with a strange mixture of immense relief and profound exhaustion. He told me to stay on the property and lock the gate. He said he was going to make some urgent phone calls. The police never showed up. Greg never filed a report. Trespassing on a private ranch with destruction of property in mind is a serious felony. Attempting to force entry while the homeowner is present is a guaranteed way to end up in a very bad situation. Greg was a bully, but he was not entirely stupid. He realized he had pushed his fake authority way past the breaking point of reality. Instead of the police, a different kind of letter arrived the very next week. It was from the actual legal counsel representing the Whispering Pines corporate development group entirely. The corporate lawyers were furious, but not at me. They were furious at Greg. His rogue enforcement tactics had exposed the entire development to a massive civil lawsuit. Jim had gleefully sent them a drafted complaint outlining harassment, trespassing, attempted burglary, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The corporate response was swift and absolute. The letter formally apologized for the unacceptable behavior of the neighborhood board. It explicitly stated that my property was completely exempt from any current and future covenants. Furthermore, it informed me that Greg had been immediately removed from his position as president of the current board. Kevin resigned the following day. The entire neighborhood committee was dissolved and restructured under strict corporate oversight. The harassment completely stopped. The drones never returned. The anonymous calls to the county health department ceased immediately. The endless stream of threatening letters vanished. They built a taller privacy fence on their side of the property line and planted thick arborvitae trees to block the view of my rusted tractor entirely. I had finally won the war, but sitting on my porch that evening, watching the sunset bleed across the western sky, the victory felt incredibly lonely and deeply bitter to me. I looked out over the dry dirt. My grandfather had bled for this land. Diane had loved the quiet peace of this sanctuary. I had defended it with cold steel. But the world around me had irreversibly changed. The sea of beige stucco houses was still there, completely surrounding my island of iron and mesquite. The silence was forever broken by the distant hum of traffic and community pool pumps. I patted Buster on the head. We were entirely safe now. We were left alone. We survived the siege. We just had to learn how to live again right here. Tomorrow morning, I will finally start moving that stacked hardwood firewood. If this story of standing up to neighborhood bullies resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who respects the value of hard work and private property. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more true stories of regular folks defending their land and their rights against overstepping neighborhood associations. Your support helps keep these grounded experiences coming every single week. Drop a comment below if you would have done the same thing.